we start this episode, I can't begin without talking about the protests that have dominated headlines following the tragic death of George Floyd, a black man from Minneapolis. On the 25th of May, George was stopped by police after it was suspected that he had purchased cigarettes with counterfeit money. Videos would later show police holding George Floyd face down on the ground with one officer, Derek Chauvin, kneeling on the neck of Mr. Floyd for almost 9 minutes, during which time Floyd lost consciousness and would later be pronounced dead. As it currently stands, Derek Chauvin has been charged with second-degree murder, and the other three officers, Thomas Lane, J. Alexander Kung, and Tao Teo, face charges of aiding and abetting. The video of George Floyd's murder is graphic, with George telling the four officers that he could not breathe, and even calling out for his mother, who had died a few years prior. Sadly, George's story is not new, as systematic racism has consistently demonstrated that the lives of Black people are deemed less important than those of their white counterparts. I will be linking in the show notes important petitions, causes, and websites that I urge you to look at in order to support the Black Lives Matter movement. Now, I had planned to cover the case of Kenneka Jenkins in this episode before the protests even began. With the Black Lives Matter movement and the protests, one of the many petitions I've seen is the call for this case, as well as that of Kendrick Johnson, to be reopened, saying that there were issues in the investigations that were not explored thoroughly by police. We'll be talking about some of these issues today, and if you'd like to support the petitions asking for these cases to be reopened, I will also link those in the show notes. On the 8th of September 2017, 19-year-old Kenneka Jenkins drove three friends to the Crowne Plaza Hotel in Rosemont, Illinois. On the 8th of September, there was going to be a party in room 926, which approximately 30 people would attend. At around 3 a.m., Kenneka and some friends were seen on CCTV walking down the hotel's corridors preparing to leave. It would later be said that Kenneka was missing some personal possessions. Her friends would therefore leave her to go back to the hotel room to get her stuff. CCTV would then show Kenneka stumbling around the hotel on her own. After an hour, her friends called Kenneka's mother, Teresa Martin, saying that her daughter was missing. Her body would not be found until Sunday, September 10th, but it was the circumstances around her death which brought her case into the media spotlight. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of the Students' Verdict podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. If you haven't already, please listen to our earlier episodes. And for those of you who are new, my name is Emily. Please follow us on Instagram at the Student Verdict blog and on Twitter at Student Verdict. Resources used in this episode will always be linked in the show notes. If you enjoy the show, please rate and review, and if you don't, then never mind. With all that said, let's get started on today's episode. According to one news report, at around 4 a.m., an hour since Kenneka's friends had last seen her, they phoned Kenneka's mother, Teresa Martin, to ask if she had returned home because they couldn't find her at the hotel. Ms. Martin, however, recalled in an interview with the morning show 107.5 WGCI that it was closer to 2 hours since her daughter's disappearance before she was contacted. The friends returned Ms. Martin's car to her and Kenneka's phone. Ms. Martin later said in an interview that she was concerned because Kenneka was the driver that night, so why did her friends have her car keys and her phone? According to Ms. Martin, Kenneka's sister Lenore made her way to the Crowne Plaza Hotel with two friends to look for Kenneka. The family were critical of the hotel's response to their concerns about Kenneka, describing the hotel as uncooperative. At 7:15 a.m., Ms. Martin called Rosemont police from the hotel's car park. By now, she and other relatives and friends had been at the hotel for at least an hour and were desperate to find Kenneka. The dispatcher told her that she should go home, wait for a couple of hours to see if her daughter showed up. If Kenneka still didn't come home, then Ms. Martin should call the police again. Teresa Martin was not willing to give up, however. She was understandably worried that Kenneka had been drinking and didn't have her mobile phone with her. Lenore asked staff at the hotel's front desk if they could look at the camera footage to see if Kenneka could be traced. Hotel staff said unfortunately it was a police matter, and so they could not give her access to the CCTV footage. Lenore then phoned 911, hoping that the police would be able to investigate and retrieve the necessary camera footage. She was advised to go to the police station and make a missing persons report, which she did. Having completed the report, Lenore returned to the hotel to ask them, as she now had a missing persons report number, whether they could allow her to access the footage. They again refused, as she did not have the physical missing persons report with her. Ms. Martin was also critical of the actions of police, who she said only attended the hotel because Lenore had forgotten to sign the missing persons report. Lenore asked the officer to check the camera footage to see if Kenneka could be seen. Ms. Martin described the officer as being in the security office for 5 minutes before saying that he didn't see Kenneka entering or exiting the building, which would suggest that she was not on the hotel premises. At 8:29, more officers were dispatched to the hotel after the hotel called and complained that the Jenkins family were knocking on hotel guest doors looking for Kenneka. After arriving, police asked to view the hotel surveillance, which did indeed show Kenneka entering the hotel, but there was no footage to show her leaving. Police checked room 926 and nearby stairwells. They could not see any sign of suspicious activity. The hotel staff agreed to continue to review the CCTV. Before leaving the hotel, officers told the family to contact them with any new information. The police response would later be criticised for a lack of urgency. CCTV from between 3:25 and 3:32 a.m. would later show Kenneka stumbling through the hotel's corridors. She could be seen bumping into walls and struggling upstairs. In the footage, she's clearly impaired. In one piece of footage, Kenneka makes her way through an empty kitchen and disappears around a corner. This was the last footage of Kenneka alive. We'll be coming back to the CCTV shortly. At 12:23 a.m. on Sunday the 10th of September, the food and beverage manager at the hotel walked through an empty kitchen. To be clear, this was not the hotel's main kitchen. It was supposedly being leased out to a restaurant. The employee goes round the corner, as Kenneka did in the CCTV, which is where the kitchen's freezer is located. The employee moves out of the camera's view before reappearing to summon a police officer. Kenneka Jenkins' body was found in that freezer. She was sadly declared dead at 12:48 a.m. on Sunday the 10th of September 2017. Kenneka was lying on her side, was missing a grey trainer which was on the other side of the freezer. Her top was pulled up, exposing her stomach and breasts. Her left hand was down by her stomach, and her right hand was curled up on her chest. It sort of looked tangled in her long dark hair which was covering her face. Once the hair had been moved from her face, you could see she was wearing false eyelashes. There didn't seem to be any obvious injuries, but I will be returning to this later. She was wearing a watch on her left wrist and had her belly button pierced. The buttons to her trousers were done up, but her trousers seemed to be sat quite low, and her pockets looked as though they had been turned out. As you looked into the freezer, her head was resting against the right-hand side. She was laying on the floor with her legs extended to the left. There was what looked like blood on Kenneka's trainer and on the floor of the freezer, likely from an injury found on her foot. In the freezer, a hair scrunchie was found by Kenneka's body, as was a clear lip gloss. A second pink lip gloss was found near the doorway of the freezer. The temperature of the freezer was approximately 1 degree Celsius, and that was after the door had been open for 2 hours. The freezer was described as being a walk-in freezer within a walk-in cooler, and was part of an unused kitchen. At 1:15 a.m., police officers brought Teresa Martin, Kenneka's mother, into an empty conference room to inform her that her daughter had been found deceased. At 5:07 a.m., Teresa Martin and Lenore were escorted by officials into the kitchen to identify the body. By this time, Kenneka's body had been moved onto a stretcher and was covered by a blanket. Teresa and Lenore were also allowed to view the freezer, where Kenneka was found. It was reported by 5 Chicago that on the 11th of September, the hotel released a statement saying, quote, We are saddened by this news, and our thoughts are with the young woman and her family during this difficult time. The hotel staff will continue to cooperate fully with local authorities. The hotel also offered to pay for Kenneka's funeral expenses, but Theresa Martin declined the offer as they had not offered their condolences to her. By this time, the police investigation into Kenneka's death was underway. They had reportedly declined the FBI's offer of assistance. In an article from the 16th of September 2017, a total of 25 people had been interviewed by police, 16 of whom had been inside the hotel room during the party. Police believed that at least 31 people had been in the hotel room that night, and they were trying to track down the remaining individuals. At the conclusion of the investigation, police would generate 127 police reports, and they would conduct 44 interviews, 36 of which took place with people who were present in room 926. Kenneka's autopsy took place at 10 a.m. on the 10th of September 2017. When she was examined, Kenneka was wearing a white bra top, blue denim jacket, blue jeans, and purple underwear. She was wearing one grey shoe on her left foot. She weighed 159 pounds and was 66 inches in length. Rigor mortis was well developed and symmetrical in the upper and lower extremities, the neck, and the jaw. Lividity was present except in areas exposed to pressure. The autopsy stated that there was no external evidence of injury to her neck. There was also no external signs of injuries to her genitalia. In the report, it was written, quote, "The anus and perineum are atraumatic and unremarkable. The back and buttocks have no traumatic abnormalities," end quote. The report did set out a few injuries Kenneka had. These included a red-purple abrasion on her right ankle and an ill-defined purple contusion on her right leg. All body organs were present in the normal anatomic positions. Remember this, as we'll be returning to this later. The pathological findings included Wisniewski's lesions in the stomach. These types of lesions are considered an important finding for the diagnosis of hypothermia-related deaths. The examiner found evidence of alcohol intoxication. Kenneka's blood level was 0.112. There were also traces of topiramate. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. The levels were recorded as 300 nanograms per milliliter. Topiramate is a drug used to treat epilepsy and migraines. Kenneka was not prescribed this medication, so it's unclear how this got into her system. Like alcohol, topiramate can cause side effects such as dizziness, impaired memory, poor coordination, confusion, and impaired judgment. Central nervous system depression or impairment combined with cold exposure can hasten the onset of hypothermia. The opinion of the medical examiner was that Kenneka Jenkins died of hypothermia due to cold exposure in a walk-in freezer. The alcohol and the topiramate were deemed to be significant factors which contributed to her death. Kenneka had been found in the freezer approximately 21 hours after she was seen on camera entering the kitchen. The freezer she was found in was a walk-in dual-compartment cooler and freezer unit. The doors of both the cooler and the freezer had external handles that must be pulled to open. And both doors were equipped with a circular, functional, internal door opening mechanism, suggesting the door could have been opened from the inside. In conclusion, the report did not reveal any trauma that would have caused or contributed to her death. The manner of Kenneka's death was therefore concluded as an accident. Kenneka was laid to rest in September 2017 following a 2.5-hour service where mourners expressed their grief and recalled their fondest memories. In a poem, her nieces said, quote, "Every time I feel upset, she makes me feel like a princess. Nika was so funny, she would make me cry." Her loved ones wore shirts that read, "Justice for Kenneka." On October 20th, 2017, a month and 10 days after Kenneka's body had been found, police confirmed that Kenneka Jenkins' case was closed. They said that they had determined Kenneka Jenkins' death to be accidental and that there was, quote, "no evidence that indicates any other conclusion." By December 2019, Theresa Martin was asking for $50 million in compensation. The lawsuit made claims that hotel staff knew Jenkins was missing prior to her entering the hotel's freezer, and that hotel officials failed to block off the area, which was under construction. It was also suggested by Jeffrey Feiger, Martin's attorney, that an employee could have mistakenly locked Jenkins in the freezer after she had entered it. The Crowne Plaza Hotel responded to the allegations saying, quote, "The death of Kenneka Jenkins was a tragedy. The lawsuit filed this week has no merit and we will vigorously contest it." At a press conference today held by counsel for Theresa Martin, the allegation was raised that there was a possibility that Miss Jenkins was locked in the freezer. Numerous media outlets have already disputed these erroneous claims of anyone locking Miss Jenkins in the freezer, referencing the video recorded by a motion-activated camera inside the kitchen. In addition, the freezer did not lock from the inside or outside and was functioning properly on the night in question. This is just another failed attempt to generate publicity for a frivolous lawsuit. End quote. Now let's talk about the digital evidence, which consisted of post-mortem photographs and CCTV from within the hotel. Graphic post-mortem photographs were released by police, which lawyers acting for the Jenkins family felt raised more questions than answers. For example, photos of Kenneka's body showed her top underneath her denim jacket was pulled up, exposing her breasts, and the pockets of her jeans appeared to have been turned out. The family were concerned by this, believing that there were questions that had not been answered before Kenneka's case was closed by police. The police released snippets of CCTV footage showing Kenneka wandering through the halls of the hotel more than a day before she was found deceased. You can access a lot of that footage on YouTube. I'd like to talk about the journey Kenneka took through the hotel, but I think we need to talk about the party first. So, witnesses told police that the party was a birthday party and that many of the people who attended knew one another. Many admitted that alcohol and drugs, including marijuana and ecstasy, were present in the room. The hotel room seemed to receive a few noise complaints throughout the evening due to the music that was being played. Witnesses recalled seeing Kenneka. She appeared drunk, although how much she actually drank, according to witnesses, varies. Some say she had 1 cup of the Hennessy cognac. Others say she had that 1 cup, but then continued drinking from the bottle. So it varies, but all were in agreement that there was no cause for concern. All witnesses denied seeing Kenneka take drugs of any form. They described the atmosphere as relaxed as they all danced and listened to music, having a good time. They recalled Kenneka leaving the party with friends before her friends then returned for her phone and car keys. At around 3:30 a.m., the friends returned again, but this time without Kenneka. They said Kenneka was missing and they'd been searching for her. A few witnesses said that Kenneka's friends didn't seem overly worried, and so they didn't think too much of it. Other witnesses did go and help search for Kenneka. They also advised hotel staff that she was missing, and security informed them that they too would look for Kenneka. When her friends couldn't find her, they drove to Theresa Martin's house to return her car. Through the CCTV footage retrieved from the hotel, internet sleuths and police have been able to retrace the steps Kenneka took in those early morning hours. One video by Gray Hughes Investigates on YouTube, which I'll link in the show notes, sets out Kenneka's final journey. It starts at around 3:30 a.m. when Kenneka walked out of the elevator and up a ramp. By this time, she was alone. You continued to see her staggering and bumping into walls, sometimes using them to keep her balance. One witness at the party said that he'd seen Kenneka drunk and high in the past, but never as bad as she was at the party. She walked down a long corridor on the conference level before wandering through 2 sets of double doors which led to the lower level kitchen. She made her way through the kitchen to another set of double doors which led to a stairway. She disappears from view for about 10 to 15 seconds. There is a water fountain in the corner near where she was, so she may have been getting a drink. She then goes into the men's bathroom for about 10 to 15 seconds. She wanders back through the same double doors to the lower level kitchen. Now, she then came to a door and some back stairs. Once she's gone up the stairs, she comes to the wooden doors to the kitchen. These doors in the footage look unfinished, almost like they were boarded up, but they weren't. It should be noted that a lock was later put on these doors after Kenneka had died to stop people from being able to get into the kitchen. Once she was in the kitchen, Kenneka made her way to the back where the freezer was. Unfortunately, no camera angles covered the freezer itself, so she simply disappeared from view. Police stated, quote, "There is no camera that shows her physically entering the freezer and no camera angle." It was said that there was a camera directly above the doorway to the freezer, which would have answered the question of what happened to her once and for all. But that was reportedly not working, although police deny its existence at all. Before you actually got into the freezer, there was a door, first of all, to the cooler. And as you went through it, there was a door to the freezer on your left. When the door to the freezer is opened, it then closes and latches behind you, which may have been how Kenneka ended up getting stuck in the freezer in the first place, if you believe this was an accident. The safety knob could be seen on the inside of the freezer door. It looked like a regular round doorknob, but rather than turning it, you actually had to push the knob in for the door to open. There is a sign saying push above the handle, but Kenneka may not have realised what she had to do if she was intoxicated. Police confirmed that the freezer door could not be opened without pushing in the white circular handle, which would activate the door latch. Going back to the post-mortem photos and the autopsy report, there was an injury to Kenneka's foot and there was blood in the freezer. This included some small spots of blood on this white door handle. Also, you'll recall one of her trainers was on and the other one wasn't. So I wonder if, out of desperation, she has attempted to kick the freezer door or hit it with her, taking her shoe off and tried to hit the door with the shoe. Again, this is all presupposing that you believe that it was accidental. I'd like to take the time now to discuss the many theories and issues that people have with Kenneka's case. They feel that the police were too quick to close the investigation when there were still so many unanswered questions. I've been down the rabbit hole with this case, and so where there is a counterpoint to any of the issues raised, I will let you know. If I miss anything, though, please do get in contact. A warning, there are a lot of matters to be discussed in this section, so make sure you are comfortable. Firstly, let's start with the post-mortem photos. These photos showed Kenneka's top pulled up so it exposed her breasts. As I said before, her jeans were buttoned up but did seem to be sat awkwardly low on her hips. A rape test was not done on Kenneka, which many people criticised, and I have to say, I don't know why one wasn't done. Referring back to the autopsy, there were no signs of injury to Kenneka's genitalia, anus, or perineum, but for the sake of completedness, I think a rape kit should have been done, which could have either provided a new line of inquiry or it could have dispelled any concerns held by Kenneka's family and friends. But going back to the undressing, scientists who have studied hypothermia have reported a phenomenon known as paradoxical undressing, where people freezing to death remove their clothes. Hypothermia is defined as a body core temperature below 35 degrees Celsius or 95 degrees Fahrenheit. It is said that between 20 and 50% of hypothermia deaths are associated with this paradoxical undressing. In urban environments, this undressing can be wrongly interpreted as signs of sexual assault. An explanation for this odd behaviour is a cold-induced malfunction of the hypothalamus, the part of the brain which regulates body temperature. An alternative explanation is that the muscles contracting peripheral blood vessels relax, having become tired, which, in turn, causes a surge of blood to the extremities, which could cause an individual to feel overheated. In an interview, Theresa Martin accepted the notion of paradoxical undressing, but said that most people are found completely naked. I think it was the areas of Kenneka's body that were exposed that caused concern, namely her breasts and stomach. Whilst discussing the post-mortem photos, we must talk about the injuries. And the injuries I'm referring to are not the injuries on the autopsy report. We accept those. There are a number of injuries that people have questioned who have seen the post-mortem photographs. Firstly, there is a scratch underneath Kenneka's right eye. To me, it looks like bloodstaining, but it is very subtle, so it's hard to tell. The next injury we need to talk about is a big one. I don't mean big as in the size of the injury, but big because many social media commentators have discussed it at length, and that is Kenneka's teeth and mouth. All you have to do is Google Kenneka's name to see hundreds of photos of her radiant smile. People were therefore concerned when they saw the post-mortem photos where they said her lips were swollen and it appeared as though the right front tooth was cracked. Some disputed this, saying it was just the angle, but Theresa Martin posted to her Facebook saying that her daughter's teeth were knocked out. She determined this from looking at videos and bruises on Kenneka's body. People also said that in the post-mortem photos there were scratches on Kenneka's left hand and knuckles. Theresa Martin also noticed from the post-mortem photos that on Kenneka's nail, which was painted white, there was a bit of black plastic, which some speculated was nail art. However, many have denied this, believing that it was from a black plastic bag. Based on a piece of footage of someone pushing a cart through the kitchen, some speculate that Kenneka's body was inside that plastic bag, sat on the front of the cart. One of the reasons that they believe this is that as the cart is being pushed through the kitchen, you see the floor is clean. Cart then knocks into some part of the kitchen. And as the cart continues to move forward, you then see there's suddenly a stain on the floor, which some people speculate is blood. A cleaner then comes along and very, very quickly cleans up the stain. Others, rather than thinking Kenneka was in the bag, others suggest that Kenneka was actually strangled with a black plastic bag. And as she struggled, that was how the small piece of black plastic ended up on her nail. They speculate that the perpetrator lured Kenneka to the freezer where she was suffocated until she lost consciousness. She then was left in the freezer to die of hypothermia. Another huge criticism of the investigation was that fingerprint testing was not done. Again, why? I'm by no means an expert, but I would think that this would be one of the first steps. Who has touched that freezer? Who's touched the handle? Once you've answered those questions, you have a list of people who you need to speak to in order to exclude them from the investigation. You would need to speak to those in particular who are not members of the hotel staff, as they would have had no reason to touch that freezer. Theresa Martin contested the police reports that concluded her daughter walked into the freezer of her own accord. Her argument was that if her daughter was as drunk as she appeared in the CCTV footage, how could she have opened the freezer door on her own? In an interview, she said, quote, "Those were double steel doors. She didn't just pop them open." I can understand Ms. Martin's point because there were two sets of doors that Kenneka would have to go through before getting to the freezer. In the CCTV, she was struggling to walk and was having to use the wall to hold her up. How easy would it have been for her to open those doors on her own? There was the suggestion that there was an alternative entrance to the kitchen via an elevator, which was situated around the corner near to where the freezer was. This elevator would have allowed someone to enter the kitchen without being picked up on any of the cameras. In Gray Hughes's YouTube video, which I referred to earlier, this idea is debunked as the area where the elevator was believed to be was shown to be an empty storage room with nothing in it. It did not provide an alternative entrance or exit. There are some more extreme theories raised in this case, which can be summarised as a body double and organ trafficking. Firstly, the body double. There are people who have taken pictures of Kenneka at the party and put them alongside screen grabs taken from the CCTV. The main differences they note are that her hair is thinner at the party than on the CCTV. Similarly, her body is thinner in photos from the party than in the CCTV. There are people who say that there are differences with her clothing. So in photos from the party, her jeans have holes in them and you can see her skin showing through. But on the CCTV, there is shredded thread and there's no skin showing through. People have therefore suggested that the person in the CCTV stumbling around the hotel was not Kenneka, but a body double, which leads to the question, why was there a need for a body double? Now let's talk about organ trafficking. The Global Financial Integrity estimates that 10% of all organ transplants, including lungs, hearts, and livers, are done via trafficked organs. One of the theories in the Kenneka Jenkins case is that she did not die from a tragic accident, but was murdered, possibly at the hands of an organ harvesting ring. Let's go back to 2015 for a moment. Documentation detailed what federal agents found when they raided a Schiller Park crematorium and the Rosemont office of the Biological Resource Center of Illinois, which arranged body donations for medical research. Agents found that the body parts were part of a body broker ring that illegally sold human remains on the black market. Both these buildings are within a 10-minute drive of the Crowne Plaza Hotel. There are many videos on YouTube discussing this matter in the context of Kenneka's case. One video, which I've linked in the show notes, suggests that the hotel was involved in the organ trafficking ring, which the host of the video said was rife in Illinois. His evidence was that the post-mortem photographs had blacked out the photo showing Kenneka's chest. He suggests that this was because organ traffickers had removed Kenneka's thymus. I had no idea what this was, but it is a specialized primary lymphoid organ of the immune system. In Kenneka's autopsy report, it does say that the thymus is not identified. However, it also states that all body parts are present in the normal anatomic positions. I'm not going to analyse all the CCTV and all the discrepancies, as we will be here for hours, but you should be aware that many critics believe the CCTV from throughout the hotel has been edited and manipulated, in particular the timestamps. There are many videos on YouTube which discuss this at length, so I encourage you to have a look at them. But by way of an example, in one of the pieces of CCTV from the kitchen area, you can see a clock mounted on the wall. However, in the next piece of CCTV, that same clock is missing. In other bits of CCTV, it is believed that you can see someone's hand grab Kenneka when she's by the stairwell, although others have put this down to her being intoxicated and so being unable to stand. Others claim to have seen shadowy figures moving through the kitchen area. The final theory we're going to take a look at is the Friends prank theory. Not a great name by me, but it sums it up pretty well. I'm not going to mention any names in this section, but there was an anonymous person on Instagram who claimed to be at the same party that night. She said that Kenneka was drugged and was experiencing adverse side effects, including a fast heart rate and overheating. It's alleged that one of Kenneka's friends asked the security guard at the hotel to open the freezer so that Kenneka could cool down. It was said some of the women at the party worked at the hotel, and so they knew the staff who worked there also, including the security guard. Skip forward, Kenneka's friends have put her in the freezer as a sort of practical joke. It suggested that the freezer might not have been on at this time. They have then left, returning to the hotel room, where some say they didn't mention Kenneka. Although one witness recalled that the friends said they searched for Kenneka, but thought she may have left with another friend, and so thought nothing of it. It's alleged that during the time Kenneka was in the freezer, she was murdered by hotel staff, which included that same security guard, who knew she was in there. This then leads us back to the organ trafficking. What is interesting, and I will say this was first brought to light by Aboriginal Global Media on YouTube, but it's so interesting. It would seem that Kenneka's mobile phone was in her right hand pocket, in her back pocket, and the outline of it and the top of it poking out of her pocket can be seen on CCTV. You'll recall that her friends said that they initially left her to go and get some personal belongings of Kenneka's, which she had left in the room. This included her mobile phone. When they then went back to her, that's when she was missing. So, how is it that she has her phone? Her friends were also the ones to return her mobile phone and car keys to her mother, Teresa. So, how have they ended up with the phone again? The only thing that creates some issues with this theory is that the motion detecting camera did not pick up on anyone else in that kitchen. But it's an interesting theory. I'd like to hear what you guys think. 1 year after Kenneka's death, demonstrators marked the anniversary by gathering at the Crown Plaza Hotel. This was the same spot that they had protested in the weeks following Kenneka's death. Some demanded that the case be reopened. Police had concluded that Kenneka's death was the result of an accident and had released dozens of photos and pieces of footage to support their conclusions. I have put the link to the Village of Rosemont website in the show notes, but please be aware that there are some graphic photos from the crime scene, so exercise caution. A private examination performed at the request of Kenneka's family concluded that there was no evidence of a physical attack or sexual assault. Rosemont's mayor, Brad Stevens, made the following statement, quote, "People see shadow images and all kinds of other things, and I don't know how and where they see that stuff, but that's the internet age we live in. People become experts and post it on social media channels. Demonstrators demanded the FBI be brought in, but the mayor said that as no new evidence had come forward in the case, there was no reason to seek any further assistance." As we talked about before with the protests and the demands for justice and equality for Black people, there has been a call for some cases to be reopened. These included cases of police brutality, such as that of Breonna Taylor, whose case has, as I understand it, has been reopened, and cases such as those of Kenneka Jenkins and Kendrick Johnson, where the families and communities do not feel that the case was investigated sufficiently at the time. I urge you to consider the evidence for yourself. Look at the CCTV, for example, and reach your own conclusions. I'll put the links to the petitions so that you can sign them if you so choose. And that concludes today's episode. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you on the next one. Remember, Black Lives Matter. This episode is dedicated to the following people who have lost their lives to police brutality since July 2014. Eric Garner, John Crawford III, Michael Brown, Ezell Ford, Dante Parker, Michelle Cusseau, Laquan McDonald, George Mann, Tanisha Anderson, Akai Gurley, Tamir Rice, Romaine Brisbane, Jerame Reed, Matthew Ajibade, Frank Smart, Natasha McKenna, Tony Robinson, Anthony Hill, Maya Hall, Philip White, Eric Harris, Walter Scott, William Chapman II, Alexia Christian, Brendan Glenn, Victor Manuel LaRosa, Jonathan Sanders, Freddie Blue, Joseph Mann, Salvador Ellswood, Sandra Bland, Albert Joseph Davis, Darius Stewart, Billy Ray Davis, Samuel DeBose, Michael Sabbie, Brian Keith Day, Christian Taylor, Troy Robinson, Ashams Pharaoh Manley, Felix Kumi, Keith Harrison McLeod, Junior Prosper, Lamontez Jones, Patterson Brown, Dominic Hutchinson, Anthony Ashford, Alonzo Smith, Tyree Crawford, India Kager, Levante Biggs, Michael Lee Marshall, Jamar Clark, Richard Perskins, Nathaniel Harris Pickett, Benny Lee Tigner, Miguel Espinel, Michael Knoll, Kevin Mathers, Betty Jones, Quintonio Legrier, Keith Childress Jr., Janet Wilson, Randy Nelson, Anthony Scott, Wendell Celestine, David Joseph, Kaylin Rockmore, Deshaun Perskins, Christopher Davis, Marco Loud, Peter Gaines, Tori Robinson, Darius Robinson, Kevin Hicks, Mary Truxillo, DeMarcus Seamer, Willie Tillman, Terrell Thomas, Sylville Smith, Alton Sterling, Philandro Castile, Terence Crutcher, Paul O'Neill, Alteria Woods, Jordan Edwards, Aaron Bailey, Renelle Foster, Stephen Clark, Antoine Rose II, Botham Jean, Pamela Turner, Dominique Clayton, Tatiana Jefferson, Christopher Whitfield, Christopher McCorvey, Eric Reason, Michael Lorenzo Dean, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd.